The galaxy slept peacefully that night, unaware that humanity had already made its decision. No warnings, no negotiations, only silence as human warships slid through the dark. And when the suns rose hours later, the alien armada that once threatened Earth had simply ceased to exist. Part 1. The Silent Preparation Commander Elena. Vasquez stood in the observation deck of the hidden military installation orbiting Neptune's largest moon. The darkness of space stretched endlessly before her, cold and unforgiving. She had spent the last 15 years of her life in this remote corner of the solar system, watching, waiting, and preparing for a moment that most of humanity did not even know was coming. The Crithian Empire had arrived on Earth 50 years ago with promises of prosperity and technological advancement. They were tall beings with crystalline skin that refracted light in beautiful patterns. Their ships were elegant, their diplomacy was smooth, and their intentions were anything but peaceful. Within a decade, Earth had become economically dependent on Crithian trade networks. Human ships could only travel using Crithian-licensed jump gates. Human industries relied on Crithian energy cells. Human governments paid tribute disguised as trade agreements. Elena remembered her childhood in Buenos Aires, watching Crithian ships pass overhead like silent predators. Her father had been a marine biologist who spoke openly about the strange readings he detected in the ocean. He noticed the water levels dropping in ways that defied natural explanation. He published papers suggesting that someone was harvesting Earth's water on a massive scale. 3 weeks later, he disappeared. The official report called it a boating accident. Elena knew better. She joined the military at 18, driven by a rage that burned colder than the void of space. She excelled in every training program, mastered every weapon system, and caught the attention of people who operated in shadows. At 25, she was recruited into the Earth Defense Initiative, a program so classified that even most world leaders did not know it existed. AED had been founded 30 years earlier by a coalition of scientists, military officers, and politicians who understood a simple truth. The Crithians would never leave peacefully. Humanity would need to fight, and humanity would need to do so with weapons the Crithians did not expect. The quantum slip drive was humanity's greatest secret. While the Crithians believed humans were limited to conventional faster-than-light travel through their controlled jump gates, human scientists had been working on something entirely different. The quantum slip technology did not move ships through space in the traditional sense. Instead, it folded space itself, allowing vessels to appear at their destination instantaneously. There was no travel time, no energy signature to detect, no warning. A ship could be orbiting Mars one moment and hovering over a Crithian battle station the next. Development had taken decades. Thousands of researchers worked in secret facilities scattered across the solar system. They communicated through encrypted channels buried in commercial data streams. They tested prototypes in the empty spaces between planets where no sensors would notice. And slowly, carefully, they built a fleet. 2,000 warships, each equipped with weapons designed specifically to counter Crithian defenses. Humanity had studied their oppressors for half a century, learning every weakness, cataloging every tactical pattern, preparing for one perfect strike. Elena walked through the corridors of the station toward the central command center. Officers saluted as she passed. These men and women had volunteered for a mission that required them to cut all ties with their families. As far as the rest of humanity knew, they were dead or lost in deep space accidents. They had given up their identities, their futures, everything they had ever known, for a chance to free their species from alien control. The command center was a vast circular room, filled with holographic displays showing the positions of every human ship and every known Crithian installation. Admiral Marcus Chen stood at the center, his weathered face illuminated by blue light. He had been Elena's mentor for 10 years, the man who taught her that victory required not just strength but perfect patience. He looked up as she entered and nodded. The intelligence arrived 3 months ago, through channels Elena still did not fully understand. The Crithian High Council had approved a new initiative called the Oceanic Reclamation Project. The official documents described it as a resource management program designed to help Earth cope with climate change. The classified documents told a different story. The Crithians planned to extract 70% of Earth's ocean water over the next 20 years, processing it into fuel for their expanding empire. Billions of humans would die. The planet would become a desert, and the Crithian Empire would move on to the next world, leaving Earth as nothing more than dried husk. The ED had known this moment would come eventually. They had simply hoped for more time. But hope was a luxury humanity could no longer afford. Admiral Chun called the final briefing. 200 commanders gathered in the amphitheater beneath the station. Elena sat in the front row, her heart beating steadily despite the weight of what was coming. The admiral spoke without notes, his voice carrying the exhaustion of a man who had carried an impossible secret for too long. Operation Nightfall would begin in 72 hours. Every human ship would deploy simultaneously across 12 star systems. They would target Crithian military installations, communication networks, and command vessels. The goal was not occupation or conquest. The goal was to cripple the Crithian presence in human space so completely that they would have no choice but to withdraw. The attack would be swift, overwhelming, and utterly without warning. Chan explained the tactical approach in detail. Each fleet commander had spent years memorizing their targets. They knew the crew rotations on Crithian stations, the response times of their defense systems, the locations of their ammunition stores. Human forces would appear inside enemy defensive perimeters, strike critical systems before alarms could even sound, and vanish before reinforcements arrived. It was not war in the traditional sense. It was surgical removal of a parasite that had been feeding on humanity for half a century. The casualties would be significant. EDI analysts predicted losses of 30% or higher. That meant 600 ships and over 100,000 lives. Elena thought about those numbers as she returned to her quarters after the briefing. She thought about the families who would never know what happened to their loved ones. She thought about her father, whose body had never been found, whose death had never been investigated. She thought about the children who would grow up on an Earth with oceans, with freedom, with a future. She sat at her desk and wrote a letter she would never send. It was addressed to her mother, who believed her daughter had died in a training accident 8 years ago. Elena told her about the mission, about the reasons, about the hope that drove every person on this station. She sealed the letter in an envelope and placed it in a drawer with dozens of others. If she did not return, someone would find them eventually. Perhaps they would understand. The countdown began. 72 hours became 48, then 24, then 12. Engineers performed final checks on every system. Weapons officers calibrated their targeting computers one last time. Medical teams prepared their facilities for the wounded who would return. And through it all, the fleet waited in silence, invisible to every sensor the Crithians possessed. Elena stood on the bridge of her flagship, the EDS Retribution, as the final minutes ticked away. Her crew moved with practiced efficiency, their faces calm despite the fears she knew they felt. She had served with most of them for years. They trusted her to lead them through what came next. She hoped she was worthy of that trust. The clock reached zero. Across human space, 2,000 ships engaged their quantum slip drive simultaneously. Space folded, reality bent, and humanity struck back against an empire that had never imagined the prey might have teeth. The war the Crithians did not know was coming had finally begun, and by dawn, the galaxy would never be the same. The midnight strike Captain James Torres materialized his destroyer squadron, exactly 3 kilometers above Epsilon Station, the largest Crithian military installation in the outer colonies. One moment his ships existed in the darkness near Neptune. The next moment they hung in perfect formation over a structure that housed 15,000 Crithian soldiers and controlled the jump gates for 3 entire star systems. The transition was so smooth that Torres felt nothing except the faint hum of his ship's reactor. Adjusting to the new gravitational environment, Epsilon Station blazed with light against the black canvas of space. The Crithians had built it to intimidate as much as to control. Its massive ring structure rotated slowly, generating artificial gravity for the inhabitants. Weapon platforms bristled from every surface. Shield generators powerful enough to withstand sustained bombardment from a conventional fleet hummed with constant energy. The station was a fortress designed to be impregnable, and it had never been attacked in the 40 years since its construction. Torres looked at his tactical display and saw his squadron's position overlaid against the station's defensive grid. The quantum slip drive had placed them in the one blind spot that human intelligence had identified after years of careful observation. The Crithians had never considered that an enemy might appear inside their defensive perimeter. Why would they? No known technology could achieve such precision. The calculations required were beyond what most species considered possible. He opened the channel to his weapons officer. All batteries ready for firing sequence alpha. Target the shield generators first. We have approximately 90 seconds before their sensors register our presence. Make every shot count. The weapons officer acknowledged, and Torres watched as his squadron's targeting computers locked onto the massive structures that protected Epsilon Station. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Human ships would not try to punch through Crithian shields. They would destroy the generators before the shields could even activate. The first salvo lit up, the darkness like artificial stars being born. Magnetic accelerator rounds traveling at a significant fraction of light speed slammed into shield generator housings. The Crithians had built those generators to withstand energy weapons and explosive missiles. They had not anticipated kinetic projectiles with enough mass and velocity to simply tear through their armor plating like it was paper. 3 generators exploded in rapid succession, their cores releasing electromagnetic pulses that cascaded through the station's power grid. Inside Epsilon Station, Admiral Zethrax was reviewing supply reports when his office lights flickered. The Crithian commander had served the Empire for 3 centuries, leading fleets to victory against a dozen species. He had earned his position through tactical brilliance and ruthless efficiency. He looked up from his data tablet with mild annoyance, assuming some minor technical malfunction had occurred. Then the alarms began screaming. His communication officer appeared on the view screen. Crystalline face fractured with patterns that indicated extreme stress. Admiral, we are under attack. Multiple contacts appeared without warning. Our shields are failing. The secondary generators are not responding. Zethrax felt something he had not experienced in decades. Confusion. Appear? Ships do not simply appear. Where did they come from? Unknown, sir. They use no jump gate. Our sensors detected no approach. They are just here. Torres watched the station's defensive systems struggle to respond. Automated turrets swiveled toward his squadron, but their targeting solutions were designed for enemies approaching from predictable vectors. Human ships danced through the defensive fire with evasive patterns that seemed almost random, but were actually the result of years of simulation. Training. Every pilot knew exactly where to be at exactly what moment. The Crithians fired thousands of rounds. Most sailed harmlessly into empty space. The second wave of human attacks targeted the station's communication arrays. Without those arrays, Epsilon Station could not call for reinforcements. It could not warn other Crithian installations. It would die alone and silent, a demonstration of what happened when an empire grew too confident. Torres designated targets and his squadron responded with mechanical precision. Missiles streaked toward antenna farms. Laser batteries carved through relay satellites. Within 3 minutes, Epsilon Station was deaf and mute across 12 star systems. The same scenario played out with variations. Commander Vasquez led her battle group against the Crithian naval yards at Proxima. Lieutenant Sarah Kim destroyed the military academy on Kepler Station, where future Crithian officers trained. Colonel David Okonkwo eliminated the Spy Network Coordination Center, hidden inside a commercial trading post. Every strike was coordinated to the second. Every target had been chosen for maximum strategic impact. The Crithians had built their control network with central nodes because centralization was efficient. Humanity exploited that efficiency by cutting every node simultaneously. Zethrax stood in his command center watching his displays fill with damage reports. Engineering sections were venting atmosphere. Weapon platforms were offline. His fleet of 30 warships was attempting to launch, but half of them had critical systems failures because human saboteurs had been working inside. Crithian supply chains for years. Components that looked perfect had microscopic flaws programmed to activate at precisely this moment. Ships that should have been battle-ready were dead in their docking cradles. He tried to understand what was happening. The humans were supposed to be a minor species, technologically backward, dependent on Crithian infrastructure for everything. They had shown no military capability beyond system defense forces that the Empire tolerated as a courtesy. Yet now they were attacking with weapons and tactics that suggested decades of preparation. How had the Empire missed this? How had intelligence failed so completely? The answer was simple, though. Zethrax would never live long enough to fully comprehend it. Humanity had learned patience from their oppression. They had learned deception from watching how the Crithians manipulated other species. They had taken every lesson their overlords taught them and turned those lessons into weapons. The Crithians had made one fatal assumption. They assumed that a species that appeared weak actually was weak. Torres received confirmation that the secondary objectives were complete. His squadron had destroyed the station's manufacturing facilities, its fuel reserves, and its escape pods. The Crithians inside had two choices: surrender or die. He opened a broadcast channel on all frequencies. Epsilon Station. This is Captain James Torres of the Earth Defense Fleet. Your shields are down. Your weapons are disabled. And your communications are severed. You have 5 minutes to begin evacuation procedures. We will provide transport for all personnel who surrender. Anyone who resists will be shown no mercy. The channel remained silent for a long moment. Then Zethrax's voice came through, distorted by damage to the station's systems, but still recognizable. You are making a grave mistake, human. The Crithian Empire spans 1,000 worlds. You cannot win this war. Torres allowed himself a small admiral. We already have one. By the time your empire learns what happened here tonight, we will have eliminated every Crithian military asset in human space. You are not fighting a war. You are witnessing an execution. The Crithian survivors began evacuating. Torres ordered his ships to provide cover while unarmed shuttles carried soldiers away from the dying station. Some of his officers questioned this mercy. These were the same Crithians who had enslaved humanity for 50 years. Why show them compassion? Torres answered with words that Commander Vasquez had spoken during training. We fight to free ourselves, not to become our oppressors. Every life we spare is proof that humanity is different. Across the theater of battle, Crithian forces collapsed. Some fought to the last soldier. Others surrendered when they realized resistance was futile. A few managed to escape using emergency FTL systems, racing back toward Crithian territory with news of the catastrophe. By the time the sun rose over Earth, 2,000 Crithian installations had been destroyed or captured. The Empire's grip on human space had been shattered in a single, coordinated strike that military historians would study for centuries. Torres remained on his bridge as the last. Fires died on Epsilon Station. His crew was exhausted but alive. They had lost 3 ships from the squadron. 96 people would not return home. He thought about their families, about the messages he would have to send, about the price of freedom. Then he thought about Earth's oceans, still full, still blue, still home to countless lives that would now have a future. The midnight strike was complete. Humanity had spoken in the only language empires. The dawn would bring new challenges, new dangers, new possibilities. But whatever came next, humanity would face it as a free species, standing on their own strength, answerable to no overlord. The prey had shown their teeth and the predator had learned to fear. The dawn of new power, Dior. Sarah Mitchell stepped off the diplomatic transport onto the landing platform of the Galactic Council headquarters. The structure floated in neutral space. a massive station built by contributions from 40 different species over the course of 3,000 years. Its architecture reflected countless cultures, countless philosophies about order and civilization. Sarah had studied this place her entire academic career, never imagining she would one day stand here as Earth's representative. The air felt different than Earth's atmosphere. Slightly heavier, with a metallic tang that came from recycling systems designed to accommodate species with radically different biological needs. Sarah wore a simple gray suit with the emblem of Earth embroidered on her shoulder. She carried no weapons, no guards, no symbols of military power. She had come to speak, not to threaten, though everyone knew the threat was implicit in every word she would say, an escort of. Council security personnel met her at the platform. They were Valorians, a species known for their neutrality and their dedication to protocol. They said nothing as they guided her through corridors filled with representatives from species humanity had only encountered through Crithian-controlled channels. Some watched her with curiosity, others with fear, a few with something that might have been respect. The council chamber was a circular room with seating arranged in concentric rings. The inner ring held the 5 founding species who had created the Galactic Council millennia ago. The outer rings held younger civilizations, arranged by the order in which they had achieved interstellar travel. Earth had never been granted a seat. The Crithians had argued that humanity was too volatile, too primitive, too dangerous to participate in galactic governance. Now, Sarah would address the council not as a petitioner seeking membership, but as a representative of a power that had just dismantled the Crithian military presence in human space. High Chancellor Vorsek of the Anthron Collective called the emergency session to order. The Anthrons were an ancient race. Their bodies composed of energy fields held together by technology humanity was only beginning to understand. Vorthek's voice resonated through the chamber without need for translation devices. Dr. Mitchell, the council acknowledges your presence. You have requested this hearing to explain the unprovoked attacks carried out by human forces against Crithian installations. The council demands an explanation. Sarah stood in the center of the chamber, aware of hundreds of eyes from dozens of species focused on her. She had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times, but now it had arrived. She felt the weight of every word she was about to speak. With respect, Chancellor, the attacks were not unprovoked. For 50 years, the Crithian Empire has maintained military occupation of human space. They have controlled our trade, restricted our technology, and eliminated our scientists who attempted independent research. 3 months ago, we discovered their plan to drain 70% of Earth's oceans, an action that would have resulted in billions of human deaths. A murmur rippled through the chamber. Vorthek raised one energy tendril for silence. These are serious accusations. Do you have evidence? Sarah nodded to her aide, who transmitted data packets to every council member simultaneously. The evidence appeared on their displays. Classified Crithian documents outlining the Oceanic Reclamation Project. Communications between Crithian High Command discussing the timeline for Earth's depopulation. Economic projections showing how the water extraction would benefit Crithian fuel production. The council reviewed the data in silence. Ambassador Zixter of the Crithian Empire stood from his seat, his crystalline body refracting the chamber's light into angry patterns. These documents are fabricated. Humanity has attacked the Empire without cause and now manufactures justification after the fact. Sarah turned to face the Crithian ambassador directly. Ambassador, your empire has treated humanity as property for half a century. You denied us sovereignty, stole our resources, and murdered our people. The evidence is genuine, and you know it. The only thing fabricated here is your empire's claim that you were protecting us. Chancellor Vorthek considered both statements carefully. The Anthrons had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations. They understood that empires often justified their actions with noble words while committing terrible deeds. Dr. Mitchell, your species has demonstrated military capabilities that were previously unknown to this council. How long have you possessed quantum slip technology? Sarah allowed herself a small, long enough to prepare an adequate defense against those who would destroy us. We are not here to apologize for our actions. We are here to inform the Council of new terms for Earth's participation in galactic affairs. The chamber erupted in shocked responses. Representatives stood and shouted in dozens of languages. No species had ever addressed the Council with demands rather than requests. Vorthik called for order, his energy form pulsing with authority. Dr. Mitchell, you overstep. The Council does not negotiate with aggressors. Sarah's voice remained calm but firm. With respect, Chancellor, we are not aggressors. We are survivors. Humanity requests nothing that should not already be ours by right. Full sovereignty over our territory. Freedom to develop our own technology. Equal status in galactic trade networks. And most importantly, a guarantee that no species will ever again attempt to exploit or occupy human space. Ambassador Zixter laughed, a sound like breaking glass. And if the Council refuses these absurd demands, what will you do? Launch more attacks? Declare war on the entire galaxy? Sarah turned back to face the full Council. We will do what we have always done. We will survive. But understand this. Humanity spent 50 years learning patience. We built our fleet in secret while pretending to be helpless. We struck without warning and eliminated the Krithian threat in a single night. Do not mistake our offer of peaceful cooperation for weakness. We would prefer to join the galactic community as friends. But we are fully prepared to stand alone as enemies. The silence that followed was profound. Every species in the chamber understood the implicit message. Humanity had proven they could strike anywhere without warning. They had demonstrated tactical brilliance and technological innovation that surpassed anything the Krithians possessed. And they had shown mercy to surrendering forces, which suggested they were capable of both restraint and ruthlessness as the situation required. Counselor Tavara of the Lothrian Consortium spoke for the first time. She was a tall being with blue skin and 3 sets of eyes. Her species had maintained independence through careful diplomacy and strategic alliances. Dr. Mitchell, the Lothrians recognize humanity's right to self-determination. We support Earth's petition for full membership in the Galactic Council and acknowledgement of sovereign status. Let the record show that we vote in favor of the human proposal. One by one, other species added their support. Some genuinely respected humanity's fight for freedom. Others simply feared what might happen if they opposed a species capable of such perfect military execution. The Krithians stood alone in opposition. Their empire fractured and their influence shattered. When the final vote was tallied, 37 species supported Earth's terms. Only 3 abstained. The Krithians cast the single vote against. Chancellor Vorthik announced the decision. By majority vote, the Galactic Council recognizes Earth and its territories as a sovereign power with all rights and protections thereof. Humanity is granted full membership status. The Council further declares that any species attempting military occupation or resource exploitation in human space will be considered in violation of Council law. Sarah bowed respectfully. On behalf of humanity, we accept membership and pledge to uphold Council principles. We seek peaceful cooperation with all species who respect our independence. As the session concluded, Sarah found herself approached by representatives from a dozen different civilizations. Some wanted to establish trade agreements. Others sought defensive alliances. A few simply wanted to understand how humanity had achieved so much while appearing so weak. Sarah answered their questions with careful diplomacy, aware that every word would be analyzed and discussed across the galaxy. Commander Elena Vasquez watched the council proceedings from her flagship. The transmission came through with slight delay, but she saw everything that mattered. Sarah had done her job perfectly. Humanity was no longer a species under occupation. They were a recognized power with a voice in galactic affairs. Elena thought about the 173,000 people who had died in Operation Nightfall. Their sacrifice had purchased something precious. Freedom, not the freedom, granted by overlords who might take it away on a whim. But freedom earned through strength and defended by courage. She walked to the observation deck and looked out at Earth hanging in space. The blue planet gleamed with oceans that would remain full, hosting life that would continue to evolve and flourish. Cities across the surface were celebrating, though most citizens still did not fully understand what had happened. They knew only that the Crithians were gone and humanity was free. The details would emerge gradually, the truth spreading through news reports and history books. Captain Torres joined her at the window. His uniform showed marks from the recent battle, stains that no amount of cleaning would remove. "Commander, what happens now?" Elena considered the question carefully. "Now we prove that we deserve the freedom we fought for. We build relationships with species who value cooperation over domination. We share our technology with allies and protect those who cannot protect themselves. We become the civilization we claim to be when we ask the Council for recognition." Torres nodded slowly. "And if another empire tries what the Crithians attempted?" Elena's reflection in the window showed a slight smile. "Then we remind them why the Crithians failed. We remind them that humanity is not prey. We are survivors who have spent our entire history learning how to fight impossible odds. We will defend what is ours with every weapon we possess and every strategy we can devise. Peace is our preference, but it is not our only option." Across human space, the fleet began standing down from combat status. Ships returned to their hidden bases. Crews reunited with families they had not seen in years. Engineers started the long process of repairing damaged vessels. Medical teams tended to wounded soldiers. And in 1,000 different locations, memorial services honored those who had died to free their species from alien control. The galaxy had changed overnight. The Crithian Empire, once powerful enough to dominate dozens of worlds, was retreating toward their core territories. Other species watched humanity with new eyes, seeing not primitive barbarians but dangerous opponents or valuable allies, depending on their perspective. The balance of power had shifted in ways that would reshape galactic politics for generations. Sarah remained at the Council headquarters for 3 more days, negotiating details of trade agreements and defense pacts. She worked with representatives from species who had suffered under their own oppressors and saw in humanity's success a template for their own liberation. She also worked to reassure those who feared that humanity might become the next empire seeking to dominate others. The work was exhausting but necessary. Freedom meant nothing if it led to isolation. On her final night at the station, Sarah stood at an observation port looking out at the stars. Somewhere in that vast darkness, the Crithians were mourning their defeat and planning their response. Other species were recalculating their strategies and adjusting to a galaxy where humanity mattered. And on Earth, 8 billion people were beginning to understand that they lived in a universe far more dangerous and far more full of possibility than they had ever imagined. The human navy had struck without warning. By dawn, the alien fleets had vanished. But the true test was not the battle itself. It was what came after. Humanity would need to prove they could be wise as well as strong, compassionate as well as fierce. They would need to show the galaxy that a species could fight for freedom without becoming tyrants themselves. The war was over. The harder work of peace was just beginning. And Earth stood ready to face whatever came next. No longer as subjects of an empire, but as free people charting their own course among the stars.